Hi, I'm Daniel, 34, and 3 months ago I made the single dumbest, most expensive attempt at family bonding in human history. I bought my parents a ranch. Not a cute little farmhouse, not a fixer-upper, not a humble retirement cabin. No, because apparently I hate my savings account and love chaos. I bought them a fully renovated, 6-bedroom, 40-acre $950,000 country ranch complete with a wraparound porch, a hot tub, a pond, and a barn big enough to host a county fair. I did it because my parents seemed stuck. 35 years of marriage, most of it spent arguing over the TV remote, pretending not to resent each other, and acting like we're fine. With the enthusiasm of two people reading hostage statements, Dad shuffled around like an exhausted golden retriever. Mom complained about everything from the color of the sky to the way Dad breathed near her. They needed something: space, peace, therapy, maybe an exorcism. I figured a week at a ranch might help them reset, rekindle, maybe even remember why they married each other instead of a houseplant. As a surprise gift, I booked them a week-long marriage renewal retreat that the real estate agent gushed about: yoga, trail rides, cooking classes, sunsets in a hot tub, basically softcore Hallmark. They were shocked in the way two people are shocked when a burglar breaks in but politely leaves baked cookies. My mother cried, my father said, "A whole week? With her?" but then tried to cover it with a cough. They left on a Saturday morning, bags packed, forced smiles plastered on like crooked bumper stickers. I waved them off and went home proud of myself. Yes, proud, naively, stupidly. Because 72 hours later, I got a call from the retreat coordinator who opened with, "Mr. Lawson, there's been an incident. Your parents are unharmed, but we need you to come immediately." And that was the moment I realized I should have bought them a plant instead. I drove 3 hours to that ranch fully expecting something mild. Maybe my parents bickering. Maybe Dad refusing to do yoga. Maybe Mom insulting a horse. Normal disasters. Instead, the moment I pulled up, I saw 2 sheriffs, 3 staff members, 1 furious-looking retreat coordinator, and my parents sitting on opposite ends of the porch like rival mafia bosses in witness protection. My mother was wrapped in a blanket like a Victorian widow. My father looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 days. And everyone else looked like they needed hazard pay. The coordinator rushed to me the way people run toward firefighters, equal parts desperation and relief. "Mr. Lawson," she said, "your parents have disrupted the program." I blinked. "They argued?" "Oh no," she said. "Arguing would have been lovely. They caused a multi-level incident." I stared at her. "What does that mean?" She took a deep breath. "Your mother locked your father in the pantry for 6 hours. Fantastic. And your father," she continued, "retaliated by releasing the therapy goats into the dining hall during a couple's meditation session." "Of course he did. 1 goat climbed onto the charcuterie table," she added, voice rising in pitch, "and the other 2 chased a newly engaged couple into the parking lot." "I can explain," Dad muttered from the porch. "Those were very disrespectful goats." Mom threw her blanket off like she was rising from the grave. "Daniel," she snapped, "your father told the instructor I needed emotional deworming." Dad pointed at her. "You do? And," the coordinator said loudly before either could continue, "they've been banned from the hot tub, permanently." I nearly didn't ask. Nearly. What, exactly, happened in the hot tub? Mom looked away. Dad looked at the floor. The coordinator pinched the bridge of her nose. "Your parents," she said slowly, "got into a heated disagreement about the proper way to make chili. That is a serious conversation," my father insisted. "And during this conversation," she continued, voice strained, "your mother pushed your father, who then grabbed her for balance, causing both of them to fall into the hot tub and break the floating aromatherapy diffuser. The lavender oil clogged the filtration system." She paused. "Sir, the entire hot tub turned purple." Dad shrugged. "It smelled nice." Mom glared. "You ruined the romantic atmosphere." "You shoved me!" Dad yelled. "You insisted chili doesn't need tomatoes." "It doesn't." The sheriffs looked like they wanted to evaporate. And then, because the universe loves timing, my mother said, "Daniel, your father has been keeping secrets." Dad groaned. "Here we go again." Mom jabbed a finger at him. "Tell him who you brought here." Silence. A shift in the air. I frowned. "Dad, who did you bring?" He winced. And my mother delivered the bomb like a woman throwing wedding china across the room. "His ex-girlfriend, Daniel. He invited his ex-girlfriend to our marriage retreat." I froze. There are moments in life when your brain just blue screens, fully shuts down, reboots without your permission. This was one of them. Dad, I managed. You brought who? He rubbed his face like a man who just realized he purchased non-refundable front-row circus tickets to his own humiliation. It's not what she thinks. She, my mother barked, walked into the dining hall wearing a silk robe and asked if the retreat couple was ready for their massage. The sheriffs actually turned away to hide their reactions. I blinked. Massage. Dad held up both hands. It was a misunderstanding. Mom snorted so hard birds flew off the roof. Daniel, she hissed. Your father's ex-girlfriend, his little high school flame, is the massage therapist here. I turned to the coordinator for help. She stared at the ground like a substitute teacher who had lost all control of her classroom by 8:15 a.m. Dad threw his hands up. I didn't know she worked here. I didn't invite her. She just showed up with a basket of essential oils and said, "Oh wow, it's you." I panicked. Mom crossed her arms. Panic does not explain letting her rub your shoulders for 20 minutes. Dad fired back. She ambushed me with a lavender scrub. It was rosemary. Oh my God, who cares? I yelled. The coordinator cleared her throat, eyes tired, soul defeated. We generally discourage guests from receiving unscheduled massages from staff members they used to date. My mother nodded vigorously. See? Policies. Rules. Standards. And your father violated all of them. Dad looked offended. I didn't violate anything. I sat there like a frozen squirrel while she talked about her gluten-free divorce. Mom pointed at him. And then you told her she looked great. Dad pointed back. I told everyone they looked great because this place is full of emotional landmines. The sheriffs were losing the battle against laughter. I ran a hand through my hair. So, okay, is that everything? The pantry incident, the goat liberation, the purple hot tub, and the ex-girlfriend masseuse? The coordinator's lips tightened. No, she said. There was one final escalation. I swear the wind stopped. Mom stiffened. Dad sighed like a man who'd rehearsed this moment in his nightmares. The coordinator pressed on. Last night, during the campfire couples circle, your parents had a disagreement. Dad mumbled. It wasn't a disagreement. Mom snapped. You accused me of hiding your slippers. You buried them, he said. You said the ghost of the ranch owner stole them. That was before I found them behind the barn. I threw my hands up. What happened at the campfire? The coordinator inhaled sharply. Your parents' argument escalated into what we in the hospitality industry refer to as a Category 4 marital event. I blinked. That means nothing to me. It means, she said, your mother threw her S-more at your father. I turned to Mom. A S-more? She lifted her chin proudly. It had extra marshmallow for maximum impact. And, the coordinator continued, your father responded by throwing the entire campfire kettle of hot cocoa at the ground. Dad cut in. Not at her. I threw it downward. It splashed. The coordinator clarified. On 3 couples, a therapy alpaca, and the group facilitator. Silence. Then the sheriff muttered. I told you the alpaca was involved. I exhaled. So now they're banned from the retreat? The coordinator shook her head. No, they're banned from the entire property, permanently. Please take them home, today. I stared at my parents, my loving, chaotic, aggressively incompatible parents. And that's when my mother whispered, Daniel, your father isn't telling you the whole truth. Dad closed his eyes like he was bracing for a hurricane. My mother leaned toward me like she was about to deliver state secrets. Not marital gossip from 2 people who once argued for 40 minutes about the proper temperature to store butter. Daniel, she said low and dramatic, your father didn't just let that woman massage him. Dad's eyes flew open. Oh, for the love of Margaret, please don't do this. Oh, I'm doing it, she said, chin lifted like a queen about to swing an execution axe. Tell him about the note. I stared. What note? Dad groaned into his hands. It wasn't a note, it was a receipt. Mom scoffed. A receipt with a handwritten message. I looked at the coordinator, who suddenly found the sky very interesting. Dad, I said carefully. What message? He muttered something into his hands. What? I leaned in. I didn't hear. Mom exploded. IT said if you ever want a private session, you know where to find me. The sheriff stopped pretending not to listen. My stomach dropped. Dad, seriously? He threw his hands up. It was a marketing line. She writes that on everyone's receipt. She handed one to the UPS guy. The coordinator nodded reluctantly. That is accurate. She is very committed to her business. Mom wasn't done. Oh, and tell him what you said after you got the note. He glared at her. I said nothing, because I was walking to the parking lot trying to remember my blood type in case you murdered me. Oh, you said something, she insisted. I heard you through the window. Dad's voice sharpened. I was talking to myself. Tell him, she pressed. Dad stood up, defeated. I said, that was unexpected. My jaw dropped. Dad? He threw his arms in the air. What else was I supposed to say? Wow, that woman I dated for 4 months in the Reagan era seems very intense? Because she is. Mom gasped like he'd confessed to a felony. You see how he talks about her? Daniel, he admired her confidence. I admired her ability to crack my spine like bubble wrap. Dad shot back. The coordinator cleared her throat. There's more. Of course there was. When Mr. Lawson left the massage cabin, she continued gently, he, forgot something. Dad's head whipped around. What did I forget? She hesitated. Your shirt. Dad blinked. No, I didn't. I was wearing a shirt. Mom crossed her arms triumphantly. Explain the shirt we retrieved from the lost and found. Dad froze. There was a lost and found. Oh no. The coordinator pulled a small canvas tote from beside her. Inside was a folded plaid shirt, the kind Dad had worn since the 80s, neatly laundered and smelling faintly of eucalyptus. Dad's face slowly crumpled into horror. Oh my God! He whispered. She de-shirted me. Mom shot to her feet. I knew it! Dad sputtered. No, she told me the massage oil would stain fabric. She said take it off or she'd get written up. Mom held out her hand like a lawyer delivering the final blow. And yet, she kept the shirt. Dad looked up at the sky. Kill me, just strike me down. I pinched the bridge of my nose so hard I saw colors. So, the scandal in the hot tub, the goat uprising, the cocoa explosion, all of this started because of a shirt? Mom jabbed a finger at Dad. No, it started because your father can't say no to aggressive essential oil saleswomen. Dad pointed right back. And it continued because you locked me in a pantry like a gluten-free hostage. At that moment, the sheriff stepped forward. Sir, one said to me kindly, we need you to take them home before we have to arrest them for public nuisance and alpaca endangerment. And right then, right when I thought I'd heard everything, my mother took a breath, narrowed her eyes at Dad, and said the words that made every muscle in my spine stiffen. Fine, take me home, Daniel. But before we leave, your father needs to tell you what he did the night before the retreat. Dad froze like an animal sensing a trap. Dad's face went pale, the specific shade of a man realizing he is seconds away from being hit by emotional artillery fire. Margaret, he said slowly. Don't. Oh, I'm doing, she replied, smoothing her blanket like a lawyer prepping exhibits. Daniel deserves to know what his father was really up to before this disaster even started. I braced myself. The sheriffs braced themselves. Even the alpaca, still tied to a fence in the distance, turned its head like it knew drama was brewing. Dad cleared his throat. It's nothing. Truly, nothing. Mom barked out one humorless laugh. Nothing? You call that nothing? Dad muttered. It was harmless. It was stupid. Mom snapped. And embarrassing, tell him. Dad looked away, mumbling. I was preparing. That got my attention. Preparing for what? Dad shifted like a kid caught shoplifting gum. For the retreat. Mom folded her arms. Tell him how. Dad scrubbed a hand over his face. I read some articles. Mom raised an eyebrow. Not articles, videos. He watched videos. I frowned. What kind of videos? Dad lifted a finger. They were informational. They were ridiculous. Mom shot back. And he paid money for them. Dad looked at me helplessly. It was a 3-day online masterclass on reigniting passion through tactical intimacy. I blinked. Tactical, what? Dad winced. Don't make me say it again. But Mom had zero mercy. Tactical intimacy, Daniel, he bought a course from a shirtless man named Fox Steele. That was his brand name. Dad argued. Who teaches men how to reclaim their dominance in the marital ecosystem. One of the sheriffs coughed violently to hide a laugh. Dad held up both hands. The algorithm recommended it. I must have clicked something once. And besides, the man made some good points about Oh, please. Mom cut in. Your father practiced alpha walks in the grocery store. The floor was slippery. Dad muttered. He stared intensely at fruit. She continued, Bananas, Daniel, bananas, as part of a confidence exercise. Dad pointed at her. I was told to choose an object of focus. It was a produce section. She snapped. Not a jungle. I pinched the bridge of my nose again. Dad, what exactly were you trying to do? He deflated like a balloon giving up on life. I wanted to surprise your mother, make the retreat special, try something new, something bold. Mom softened for half a second, then she added. And then he tried to test one of the moves on me. Dad's eyes widened. Margaret. I held up both hands. Wait, what moves? Dad stared at the ground, mumbled. Move. 14. Mom scoffed. He tried to dip me, in the kitchen, without warning. Dad threw his hands up. The video said spontaneity is key. You dropped me. She shrieked. You dropped me onto a ceramic mixing bowl. It was an accident. The coordinator raised her hand timidly. Is that why you came in limping on day one? Mom pointed at Dad triumphantly. Yes, your father dipped me onto a bowl like I was a sack of potatoes. Dad muttered. The bowl was too close to the counter. You dipped backward. She snapped. My spine folded like origami. The sheriffs were definitely laughing now. I exhaled slowly. Okay, so before the retreat even started, Dad was practicing intimacy maneuvers he learned from a shirtless confidence guru. Dad nodded miserably and dropped Mom into a mixing bowl. He nodded again. Mom crossed her arms. And that, Daniel, is why I started the retreat already furious. Dad's head snapped up. Oh, come on, you hid my slippers to punish me. They were ugly. They were comfortable. I dragged my hands down my face. So basically, the retreat was doomed before it even began. Both parents fell silent, then Dad added quietly. And that's not the worst thing. My mother whipped around. Oh? Oh, please, go ahead, tell him the other thing, you absolute disaster of a man. Dad shut his eyes. There's something I need to confess. Dad inhaled like a man about to confess to a crime that would require legal counsel and holy water. Daniel, he said, the night before the retreat. I wasn't technically where I said I was. Mom folded her arms dramatically. Oh, he wasn't technically anywhere, he was very specifically trespassing. Dad glared. It wasn't trespassing, the gate was open. It was open. Mom snapped. Because a delivery truck was entering, you followed it in like a stray dog chasing a pizza van. The coordinator quietly nodded, confirming the metaphor. I stared at Dad. Why did you go early? Dad rubbed his temples. I wanted to assess the environment, the lighting, the hot tub jets, the ambience, make sure it was optimal. Mom barked a laugh. You interrogated the staff like you were building a criminal case. The coordinator stepped forward. He asked every employee for credentials. He demanded a tour of the pantry. He attempted to stress test the meditation deck by jumping on it. Dad raised a finger. That deck had structural wobble. It did not, she said, deeply offended. And, Mom continued, he cornered a yoga instructor behind the stables demanding to see her certification in alignment safety. Dad waved a hand. She walked too fast. I needed answers. The coordinator's jaw tightened. And then he entered the hot tub. Dad bristled. I removed my clothing only temporarily. You were naked. Mom shouted. Naked on private property. Dad argued. I kept my underwear on after the first 30 seconds. The coordinator stepped in before my soul left my body. He said he was evaluating hydrotherapeutic efficacy. Security escorted him out. Mom added. He wrapped himself in a pool towel like Julius Caesar and lectured the guards about lumbar support. I rubbed my forehead. So the retreat collapsed before it began. Dad swallowed hard. And that's not the worst part. Mom slapped her hand on her knee. Oh, he's finally going to admit it. Dad looked at me defeated. I wasn't alone. Mom's gasp could have cracked glass. You tell him right now, Richard. Dad winced. I brought someone. Not someone. Mom snarled. My sister, Joanne. Of all possible people, Aunt Joanne, professional drama generator, 3-time divorcee, wine enthusiast, occasional tarot reader, always flirting with someone inappropriate. Dad sighed. She's going through a rough time. I thought the fresh air might help. Mom shrieked. It was a marriage retreat, Richard. Why would she need to be there? She said she'd stay out of sight. Dad said miserably. She promised to sleep in the barn. Mom added. She didn't sleep in the barn, she slept in the storage closet, and decorated it with Christmas lights and called it her healing cave. The coordinator confirmed this with a pained expression. She also printed a sign that said no men accept cowboys. Dad muttered. She made it on Canva. I felt my sanity peeling away. Mom continued. And then your aunt manifested a cowboy by crashing couples yoga, snatching a S-more, and telling everyone she was open to holistic romance. Dad defended her weakly. She's experimenting spiritually. She hit on the ranch owner. Mom snapped. She told him he had mountain lion energy. The coordinator sighed, and she attempted to lead a guided meditation that devolved into a rant about the government controlling the weather. I pinched the bridge of my nose. So Aunt Joanne caused chaos at a retreat she wasn't even enrolled in. Dad lifted both palms. She needed support. Mom raised a finger. And then she told me, in front of people, that you said I wouldn't vibe with the activities. Dad's face twisted. I meant your back wouldn't vibe. You slipped a disc in 2019. Mom stared at him like she might strangle him with a yoga strap. And that, she said, voice trembling in outrage, is why I chased her across the courtyard with a yoga mat. The coordinator added. One of our goats fainted from stress during the incident. I closed my eyes. Dad swallowed again. That's still not everything. Mom glared, horrified. You cannot possibly be about to say it. Dad whispered. I brought Trevor too. This is the final part. I blinked hard. My cousin Trevor? The one on probation? Dad nodded miserably. He said he wanted to work on self-improvement. Mom threw her hands up. He believes laundry is a government plot. The coordinator cut in, voice strained. He broke into the wine cellar, tried to lead meditation when our facilitator stepped away, told couples that monogamy is emotional capitalism. Mom practically screamed. He sold river water as essential oils. Dad added sheepishly. He did put sage in some. The coordinator continued. He told guests to release attachment to materialism, and several people began crying over their wedding rings. I stared between them. And all this happened at a marriage retreat, because Dad invited 2 unregistered lunatics and trespassed naked? Both nodded like this was normal. I sighed the sigh of a man who regretted every gift he'd ever given. You two don't need a retreat, you need separate hobbies, noise-canceling headphones, and a therapist who charges extra for danger pay. Mom sniffed. I could take pottery. Dad considered. I've always wanted to do woodworking. Great, I said. Let's start with activities that don't involve trespassing, goats, or nudity. The coordinator approached us, exhausted. Sir, please, take them home, permanently, and perhaps, consider never returning. We guided my parents to the car, Mom grumbling, Dad sighing, both alive and still somehow married. As I started the engine, Dad cleared his throat. Daniel, do you think I could get a partial refund? Mom didn't hesitate. If you try, I will bury you under the barn. And for the first time all weekend, they laughed. And somehow, that stupid laughter told me they'd survive each other another 35 years.